Good day, everyone. I am Ronald, moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar that is on documenting resident violations. I want to introduce our presenter for today, that is Paul Flogstad. Paul has been involved in the real estate industry for the past 38 years. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Paul.
Good afternoon, everybody. And today we're going to be talking about documenting resident violations and what you can do with your residents if they have any breaches of contract or anything of that type. So we'll get into that. Residential lease violations happen every day, and every landlord has had the misfortune, I'm sure, of having a tenant break a stipulation in their lease agreement. Knowledge is power, and it may very well protect you from liability. Before learning how to handle the rental lease violations, you first must understand what constitutes a lease violation. Rental lease agreements violations are not uncommon. Even the most responsible tenants might make a mistake every once in a while. Now, you're going to communicate to your tenants in many different ways. So these are in person, email. When you post a notice, if you post the notice, you have a time frame to comply. Types of notices, you're going to have violation letters, you're going to have cure or quit or demand for compliance or possession, a substantial violation, or a notice to quit for repeated violation, or notice to pay or quit, a demand for rent in a 3 or 10 or 14-day notice. You can send things through the mail. Keep the copy of the envelope before you send it. Calling or texting, always document the calls in writing. Be sure also that the resident has agreed to receive text from you. Now, I've listed here 3 landlord forms. You need to consider fair housing in all of this. Now, documenting the resident file, it's very important to have good file notes and have a good file organization with your setup of your files. Document, of course, who, what, where, when, and how. Always keep in mind a complaint may go to court, so think about what you're going to need. Now, types of infractions. The most common, of course, is non-payment of rent. You can impose rent protection lease violation fee or a late payment fee. Non-payment of rent, follow rent collection policies. You should have a policy about rent collection. Now, you need to know your state laws as well as the program regulations for the property. Returning payments to the residents once the rent is rejected, make sure you send them a letter. If charges are due, do not waive the late charge. One thing that causes some damage is decorating. Some example of lease clauses. Any resident damage, property damage are no joke. I would take photographs, and if you have a detailed documentation, you can comparatively assess the current state of the property and provide documentation to the resident stating the expectations on care of the unit. Understand billing practices in your area, what is allowed under state law. When a resident moves out, document the damages, video it, take photos, and provide the resident with a detailed itemization. There's lots of different reasons for hoarding, dementia. It is a disorder, a persistent difficulty of the hoarding can cause the following health and safety issues: pest infestation, fire safety. So what you need to do to cure this issue is to connect with the hoarder, put yourself in their mindset. So make sure that you've understood the reasons for their hoarding a little bit. Pet violations is another thing that you're going to run into. But if you do, you can require the following. You can require a deposit paid for each pet. Some of the violations that occur are not cleaning up the pet waste or not having a pet on a lease. Of course, you know that animals can inflict some damage to your property. Landlords and property managers have several reasons why they might create a pet policy. Unauthorized pets are typically discovered by management during routine inspections. Your lease agreement should state your pet policy. If you have a no pets policy, state that pets are not allowed. Before they move in, let your tenants know you intend to schedule quarterly maintenance visits. Unauthorized scenarios: if you suspect your tenant is keeping a pet and haven't agreed to, it's a good idea to get photographic evidence if possible. Tell your tenant if they do not comply with the time frame, it's best to follow your formal procedures in dealing with a lease violation And additionally, official notices are more likely to be taken seriously by your tenant. Landlords and property managers should have an unauthorized pet lease violation form. Other types of unauthorized pets, some tenants will assume since they live in a pet-friendly building. Now, we need to talk also about service animals and companion animals. Comfort animals, assistance animals, however you want to call them. Does the resident have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities? Service animals are not pets. Do not charge a pet deposit or pet fees. You need to send a violation letter if the resident is not picking up after their animal. The resident animal is aggressive towards others. Use care not to call the animal a pet in the violation letter. Landlords are required to make reasonable accommodations for tenants with service animals and assistive animals under the Fair Housing Act. ADA treats assistive animals differently than service animals. Accommodation, the service animal specifically trained to provide a service. Assistance or the service animal has to be any dog that is individually trained to do or perform tasks. They call those emotional support animals or therapy animals or comfort animals, or anything of that type. Is this person disabled? Does the person need an accommodation because of that disability? And what accommodation is needed? Now, there are internet scams going on, and they have give prescriptions or certifications and registrations. Under fair housing, there's no automatic restrictions on species, breed, weight, or size. They cannot pose a direct threat. And best practices have the person with the assistance animal. Now, there's two reasonable requests. One is the verification from a knowledgeable source, and two, it has to have a connection or a nexus to this property. We've developed what is called a companion animal request form. Resident harassment and bullying, we need to talk about that. Don't ignore complaints. You're worried about their behavior if they're posing any risks, and make sure you have a harassment policy. Unauthorized occupants, tenants have guests come over and they lease their units all the time. Gather documentation, proof of the unauthorized person. Then require all vehicles to be parked on the property must be registered with the office. Parking violations, a 3-day pass for visitors, temporary card on the dashboard. Damages found during inspections, of course, the damages to the rental unit. One of the most crucial parts of being able to charge a tenant is before the tenant even moves in. You need to document, write work orders to correct it in the future, take pictures. Some landlords include a list of standard repair costs, drugs, smoking marijuana, noise complaints. You're going to run into those. Landlord, you're going to receive a lot of noise complaints from time to time. So it's your responsibility to address the complaint immediately. If you find a complaint invalid, let the complaining party know that you've concluded the investigation and have found that the tenant did not violate the noise policy. Document the complaints. Now, one thing we need to talk about is policies. You've got a lot of tools as the property owner or manager. You've got your incident reports. So I think we've covered a lot of these items. So be professional in all of your actions and make sure that you do not fail to send the infractions. If someone is not following the rules, they need to be infracted. You need to have a history, a paper trail. So if you have to evict that person, you've got a good paper trail of all the evictions, all the things they've done, and have good file notes and put it in their files. So that's the primary thing you need to do. And then be professional about your properties. If you have to run a issue with a particular tenant, be sure that you're professional with them and don't get back into an argumentative situation. Just to be above the fray, and you'll be respected a lot more. Now, always send always send the infraction as well. Don't even if you verbally tell them, be sure you follow up and send an infraction. Send it for certified mail, return receipt requested, so that you've got the card in the mail that they received that. So if they get in front of a judge and they say, "Well, I never got this," or "I never heard about it," and you've got the receipt to prove that they got it. So that's the best thing for documentation. So I thank you for attending. And hopefully you picked up a couple of hints anyway. Again, thanks for attending and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for this session. And that concludes the session for today. Thank you everyone for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.